Hi, I'm Hayley and this is the next video in our Rhythm for Life series. I'm going to be reading to us today from Deuteronomy 11, starting at verse 1. So, love God, your God. Guard well his rules and regulations. Obey his commands for the rest of time. Today, it's very clear that it isn't your children who are front and centre here. They weren't in on what God did, didn't see the acts, didn't experience the discipline, didn't marvel at his greatness. The way he displayed his power in the miracle signs and deeds that he let loose in Egypt on Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and all his land. The way he took care of the Egyptian army, its horses and chariots, burying them in the waters of the Red Sea as they pursued you. God drowned them. And you're standing here today alive. Nor was it your children who saw how God took care of you in the wilderness up until the time you arrived here. What he did to Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, son of Reuben. How the earth opened its jaws and swallowed them with their families, their tents, and everything around them, right out of the middle of Israel. Yes, it was you, your eyes, that saw every great thing that God did. Moving down to verse 18. Place these words on your hearts. Get them deep inside you. Tie them on your hands and foreheads as a reminder. Teach them to your children. Talk about them wherever you are. Sitting at home or walking in the street, talk about them from the time you get up in the morning until you fall into bed at night. Inscribe them on the doorposts and gates of your cities so that you'll live a long time and your children with you on the soil that God promised to give your ancestors for as long as there is a sky over the earth. That passage tells us about the Israelites just as they are about to enter the promised land. And God is challenging them to remember what he has done. But not just remember as an individual, not just remember person by person who God is and what he has done, but actually to remember and to pass on the message, because God knows that if his message isn't passed on, that as the generations come on, people will forget who he is. He says, doesn't he, in the beginning of that passage, today it's very clear that it isn't your children who are front and centre here. They weren't in on what God did. They didn't see the acts. They didn't experience the discipline. They didn't marvel at his greatness, the way he displayed his power in the miracle signs. It wasn't your children who saw what I did. It was you. And in order to enable your children to know, to enable your children to remember, and to enable your children to keep worshipping, you need to pass on this message. And God didn't say, just do it once a year, just do it on the special seasons or the special festivals that I've given you. No, do it every single day. From the minute you wake up in the morning until you go to bed at night. As you are sitting at home, as you are walking in the street, talk about me and what I have done. Write it publicly on the walls and on the gateposts so that people can know my story and they can follow me too. They can remember the things that you have seen and know that I am God and I act in miraculous ways. And we're in this season now, aren't we? We're in this season of remembering. We're remembering through Lent, Jesus being in the desert. And now in Holy Week, we're remembering that last week of Jesus' life. On Sunday, we remembered how Jesus came into Jerusalem as the king, not quite expected king. And we remember this week all of the things that Jesus went through in his last week of life. And on Good Friday, many of us often engage in walks of witnesses. This is a wonderful time of year for us to share our faith, to share what we believe and why we believe it. And we often engage in activities very publicly, don't we, in lots of different ways that tell people the story of Jesus and why it is important to us. And that's really important because we, just as the Israelites are challenged to pass on the hope we have, to pass on the story of who God is and what he has done, to pass on this message of Jesus and what it meant for him to come to earth, to live a perfect life, to die on the cross and to be resurrected again. What it means for us as people individually and what it means for humanity as a whole. We too are challenged to be people who talk about what God has done every minute of every day, from the minute we wake up to the minute we go to bed, as we are walking down the street and sitting in our homes. And this time of year especially is such a wonderful time of year where we can share quite openly what we believe and why we are celebrating this week in particular. And we can't, can we? We can't go out on our walk of witnesses this Friday. We can't go out and publicly be in our town centres and share that hope that we have in that way, because we are living in very different and very strange times. But that doesn't stop the challenge. That doesn't mean that we're let off the hook. God is very specific that we need to be the people that tell those who haven't seen or experienced for themselves what this season is all about, what Easter, Good Friday represents, and why it is important to us. And so this week, I wonder if I could challenge us to think creatively about how we could share our testimony with others. On our website this week, we are sharing the activities we'd planned for Good Friday, but just in a different format. So we have been sharing videos that show who Jesus is to different characters within the Holy Week story and what they have made of him. So on Monday, if you've watched, we had a disciple. Yesterday, we had a Pharisee. Tomorrow, we're going to have Pilate. On Friday, there'll be the centurion. And on Sunday, there will be Mary. And each of them are giving their perspective on Jesus and their perspective of what happened in the Easter story. What is your perspective? What do you see happening in the Easter story? And what does it mean for you? And how this week could you share it with somebody else? So the first thing I'd like to encourage us to think about is, if we are up for it, maybe videoing ourselves, sharing who Jesus is to us, why it's important, and the difference it's made in our lives. It doesn't need to be long, it could just be a minute. And if you feel really up for it, you could send it to me and I will include it in our series of Who is Jesus this week. And it will be part of the series for other people to see, to understand that Jesus wasn't just a historical figure that died and had eyewitness accounts, but Jesus is a figure that is alive today and still impacts our lives. You could maybe write a letter of testimony. We have been thinking, haven't we, this last year about our book of testimony, and lots of you have sent in testimonies for that book. And that idea was based on something that happened at 3 Generate, where older Christians wrote letters to younger Christians, sharing an element of their faith and how it had impacted them. And we could do the same. Instead of writing a letter for our book of testimony, you could write a letter to someone in your life sharing a testimony of why Jesus is important to you and the difference he's made in your life. Maybe it could be an example of a time you felt Jesus close to you, or something that God did for you, or why you have hope in the midst of darkness. And maybe you could send that to someone that you know. It could be a younger person, it could be a friend, it could be anybody, but maybe that's something you could do this week. Maybe you could phone someone and tell them your story. Maybe phone them and say why Easter is important to you this week. If you are on any kind of social media, maybe you could set a status saying what Easter is about and what it means to you personally and what it means for the world too. That's kind of a fairly low risk way of witnessing. Or if you've got children in your life, it might be your own, it might be grandchildren or great grandchildren or nieces or nephews or children of friends down your street. Why not offer them a bedtime story? Why not read them the story of Easter? And you could do that on the phone, you could do that over video calling, you could record a video of yourself and send it to them. And at the end, just add on a few sentences about why this story is important to you. We are called, aren't we, to pass on this message of Jesus, to share the hope we have. And now more than any time, probably in living history, is it important to share the hope that we've got in the midst of this darkness. We have a wonderful opportunity this week to witness, to pass on that message, to remember what God has done, and to help others see it too. And so my challenge this week is for you to find a way to creatively do that. Because even though we are isolating, as our poster says, we are not isolated. And even though we are on our own, does not mean we cannot still witness to who Jesus is and why he is important for the whole world. So let's creatively think about ways we can do that for each other. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you for everything that you have done for us. I thank you for this story that we remember in Holy Week, for Jesus coming to earth and living a perfect life, for dying on the cross and rising again, so that we might be able to have fullness of life, a relationship with you, and we might be free of all the things that bind us up. Lord, I pray that you help us to remember this week everything you experienced, that we would walk through this story with you and we would sit in its meaning for our lives. And I pray, Lord, that you would give us opportunities to share that hope that we have, to share light in the midst of this dark situation, and to witness to you and to this story and to the hope and the love and the freedom and the new life it offers. So I pray, Lord, you would prompt us now. Prompt us of the people that we need to share this with. Fill our mouths with the words we need to say, and give us the boldness and courage, Lord, to be storytellers and story sharers in this climate. Help us, Lord, to talk about you from the minute we wake up until the minute we go to bed with all of those that we encounter each day. In your name we ask it. Amen.